What's going on, podcast listeners? My name is Michael Chernow. I am a restaurateur and lifestyle entrepreneur, and I am truly obsessed with living a life better than yesterday through wellness, fitness, and good vibes. I've always wondered if the drive to succeed is something we are born with, or if it's something that is made over time through grit, drive, and perseverance. I get to answer that question exactly, and the goal of this podcast is to talk with people that have absolutely crushed it in life and have inspired me to do the same. This is Born or Made. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Born or Made podcast. I have a guest on today that has been inspiring me for a long time. He didn't know it, but his brands have really made waves across a number of industries. Justin Guilbert founded Harmless Harvest, which is a coconut water brand that I'm sure you are very familiar with, in 2010. He is still a chairman of the company. He also launched a brand called Bravo Sierra, which is a really, really cool, I would call it like a men's grooming brand that is based all around military. And I'll let him tell the story about it. I love the brand. I was introduced to Bravo Sierra right when they launched. It's probably also got my favorite crew neck sweatshirt, period. I wear that crew neck sweatshirt all the time in the gym, kicking around at home. It's just like an amazing sweatshirt. And then most recently in 2020, launched a great snack brand called Good Fish, which utilizes salmon skin and turns them into chips. They're delicious. They're truly delicious. And again, I'm going to let Justin tell us a little bit about how he came to that. But I'm imagining, because I'm in the seafood game, that these fishermen take the skins off of the salmon potentially to pack the salmon into canned salmon, and then they don't have anything to do with the skins. Is that what it is?
It's a byproduct. That's right. It's a trash stream, if you want to call it that way, but it's gold.
Yeah, it's incredible. So Justin, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, man. Really appreciate the time.
So Born or Made is a podcast that I've been doing for about a year now, where I get people like you that have really inspired me over the years to be a better version of myself. And the idea of the podcast is to really understand this idea of nature nurture, whether you were born with some sort of skill set that's gotten you to where you are today, that just drove you sort of intuitively, or if you were made over time, consciously made over time to get to where you are. We get there through your story. So I'd love to learn about you from as way back. I know that you were born and raised in France. Gilbert is a pretty French last name. I'd love you to start there and tell us how you ended up where you are today, man.
Well, okay. I'll take this as a therapy session as well. I'll see if there's anything I learned from myself through this nature nurture process. Yeah, I was born in Paris in the mid 70s, and the product of the 60s. I say my parents met in the late 60s in LA. My dad was a teacher at UCLA, French doctor teaching at UCLA, and my mom that year was the cover model of Sports Illustrated swimsuit. So she was the 1969 swimsuit.
Wow.
Sports Illustrated model. So they were just hopping, you know. He was a hot French doctor, and I guess she was a hot American model. And they got married. Got married within months of meeting, which I'm not sure was the smartest idea because they got divorced later on. But basically grew up in a household where we spoke English at home. It was a very American household because my mom didn't speak a word of French when she got to Paris. And a very unusual, I would say, set of cultures. On the one hand, a pretty, I would say, intellectual, very culture-oriented family on the French side. That was very much not into business at all, had centuries of history in the country, and had the typical French attitude of, you know, your value is your social capital and your capability as an individual to think and belong to certain circles, intellectual circles. Business is for, you know, the lesser folk. You know, it's, if you're going to do something for money, then you're obviously, you know, a weakling. And then on the other side, I had this American family, very, very different, with a self-made, very successful grandfather on the American side, who came from nothing as a sharecropper in Michigan, and grew a very substantial business over the decades, and was the archetype of the American dream, or the greatest generation, however you want to call it, and almost a John Wayne character in my life. So two very different worlds that I kind of hopped back and forth in. And there you go for your nurture. I'm breeding two ends of the spectrum, and here I am wanting to be a performance artist and realizing that my performance is business. So I made peace with it. My medium is business, and my work is about not a commentary on society, but a actual practical application on improving our social fabric through business.
That's amazing, man. I mean, so your mom's family, where were they from?
So they're my grandfather's from Michigan and grandmother's from Chicago, but they moved to Connecticut in the mid 50s, and established their roots in Greenwich, a poor middle class blue collar neighborhood. Now they were in the Greenwich scene from the 50s until today, very involved in the community. My grandfather built this business, amazing business, on the tail of World War II. He was a Navy lieutenant, and started working with the military to distribute consumables overseas, in a lot of markets that needed products, right?
Oh my God. So I just got to stop you there for a second. My grandfather was a Navy lieutenant and did the exact same thing. And that's how my grandfather, that is how my grandfather, what?
Are we cousins?
But my grandfather tells the story where he was an officer in the Navy, and he, after the war, the Navy had an enormous amount of surplus.
Yep.
Because the war was over, and there was just warehouses and warehouses of surplus. So they filled all these what are they, how they transport things across the country. What are those metal things called?
Oh, the containers, or the ship totes? Yeah.
Filled shipping containers with all this surplus, and they opened it up to the Navy officers to purchase. And so my grandfather and all of his Navy buddies, probably your grandfather, bought all this stuff and sold it here in the States and also overseas. And that's how he got his entrepreneurial, my grandfather was an entrepreneur as well. And that's how he got his entrepreneurial wings going. So that's great. So did you spend time in the States as well as a kid?
Yeah, I would spend every summer about 2 months a year. I was in the States. And then I was in my bizarro world, where I went to a French school, but was part of the American Boy Scouts, Troop 112, which is the American Boy Scouts of Paris. All 6 of us learning how to make fires to get our merit badges in the courtyard of the U.S. Embassy. So you can imagine the vibe was very unusual. And I would go to Boy Scout camp. There wasn't any in Europe, so they would send us to these Marine Corps bases, and we'd set up tents in Bavaria, and hang out with all the soldiers. And
how far did you get in the Boy Scouts?
Sorry?
Are you an Eagle Scout?
I no, because I discovered pot and chicks by the time I was, a first class Boy Scout, and the motivation and commitment to get those extra merit badges really waned.
Shit the bucket as soon as you met the green and the ladies.
Yeah, Nirvana was really kicking. It was 1992, and I was very much into grunge. I was convinced I was obviously an anarchist, and the system needed to be broken. So those were not Boy Scout values for those couple of years of teenage angst. Unfortunately, I moved on.
So when you were you were that age, it's funny. I was a Boy Scout too, and I made it to Life Scout, and then I met
nice.
I met the green as well. But like back in those days, I mean, how did you think? Because I'm also an entrepreneur, and creator of businesses.
Yep.
And that's what makes me that's what drives me. That's what, I mean, outside of the love I have for my family, I really, the creativity is what drives me. And I was kind of thinking that way early on. Like,
yeah, I started as early as I can remember. I was, for some reason, hustling on some project. It always had some form of, I think any passion or interest or hobby that I had to turn into some initiative that was going to convince other people. And if they could compensate me for that, I would be, happy about it. So I was really into fish as a kid. And so I decided I was going to produce this substantial magazine, which was basically Xeroxing 5 pages of, doodles. And I would sell yearly subscriptions, even though I only had an issue in hand. So I defrauded a lot of my family with that first initiative. I was probably 7 or 8. I kept the money, didn't necessarily ship out all the issues of that yearly subscription. That was probably my first project. And then I had an investment fund when I was 14 with a grand total of maybe $500 that I pooled from all of my friends. And we were buying stock before there was an online trading, capability through old school brokers and trying to, what people say, buy the dip. We were doing that. We lost our shirt really quickly there too. I mean, it was all kinds of bullshit. It's been going on forever. It still goes on. It's like every day there's a new idea, project, initiative. I think, I don't know if it's business more than this desire, this burning need to execute on ideas.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so I think that is what distinguishes the doers from the speakers. I think that there is like, I was speaking to this other guy about this idea that, I remember as a kid, if 2 kids were going to get into a fight, and you knew that they were going to get into a fight, or there was talk about a fight, they would just yell at each other. They would scream at each other. They'd get in each other's face, and nobody would do anything. But there was always that one kid that would like not talk, just punch. Like he wouldn't say anything. He would just, and he just hit you. And like, I think that is, the entrepreneur is the one that just sort of kind of comes out of nowhere and just hits you and just is like, like, what's the point of talking all the nonsense, right? Like, let's just go out there and do it.
That is the single best analogy I've heard about being an entrepreneur. I love it. It really is, because honestly, it's just very funny. The number of times I've been into situations where I could get into a physical argument, mostly when I was younger, and I've always had this attitude of like, well, if I'm gonna stand up and go see this guy or whatever, we're gonna have to do something out of this. So might as well just walk away, move on with my life, and not get into trouble. But the point is, you're absolutely right. It's the same as those morons that we probably all were, before you jump off a cliff. There's always that one guy, they call him the daredevil. I think he's just the only guy who's like, well, we're up here, we're gonna do this, right? We're not doing like a dance. Yes, I think that's the big difference. I've met brilliant people with really, really creative, strategic capability, you name it, hardworking. And they quit their corporate gigs to start that big ass company they've dreamed of doing their whole life. And they just are terrified and they stay stuck for a year and then they go back to a company. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. They're amazing at what they do. But it frustrates me. And what I realize seems to be the easiest thing about the job is the hardest one for everyone else. I'm not particularly smart or useful, but I do have that quality that you mentioned, which is, let's just fucking do it. Let's just do it and figure it out. Yeah. And I don't know if that's nature or nurture. I think a lot of it is nurture. You know why? And it's going to sound a little silly and cheesy, but as a French dude, you live in this world where nothing is really doable. And I don't want to, I'm not trying to complain. I'm just saying that's the culture. European culture is really, it's complicated. Everything's hard. Everything's difficult, challenging. You stay in your stasis. Even the social fabric of the country is very much stagnating. And then you come to the US and it's like, everyone's like, fuck it, I'm going to try something. I'll do it. And you're like, what? You can do it? You just get up and you do it? and nothing, and it happens, well, yeah, you fail 99% of the time, but nobody gives a shit about you failing, so go for it. And I think that's as almost a foreigner looking into the US MO, which is unique. I don't know any other country like that. Even if I look at really high growth places with tons of entrepreneurs in Asia and Vietnam and China and so forth, you don't get that same vibe of like, you just got to get up and do it. I think that's a cultural.
Do you think it's the fear of failure for most people? I mean, do you think that's what it is? That's what keeps people in their seat?
Yeah, I mean, I think the fear of failure is the single block. And then when you need to pop your cherry, man, you need to fail. You need to fuck it up hard, lose your shirt, have everybody, point their finger and say, ha ha at you, like a Simpsons episode, and feel like shit. And then the next time you fail, it's going to feel a little less worse. And by the time you're my grand age of 43, you realize that failure is the name of the game. This is your business. You're in the business of failure, and every 10 shots, one of them succeeds. So you're good. And the success beats off everything else. So I don't feel the failure anymore. You become desensitized. You don't fail less, you fail as much. You just don't care about it, and you turn it into opportunity.
I think, I have a very similar mindset to you. I mean, I've never been, I don't know what it is. I mean, you say it's nurture. I actually think it's nature, man. Like, I've never been afraid. I'm just not like, I've never, like, the fear of opening up a business or starting something is actually, I'm actually afraid of the other thing, where I'd be like just given directives all day and not have any freedom to, like, I don't think I would thrive. I think I would fail miserably in those environments. The last job I had was essentially running a restaurant for 8 years for a guy who really just let me do whatever I wanted to do. He was just like, it's yours, man, go for it. And like, I think that's the only reason why I succeeded, from 19 to 27. But like, I just, when it was, time to do my own thing, people would ask me if I was nervous or scared. And there was like not a fucking scared bone in my body. Like it was like, I was so comfortable making those decisions. And
I'll tell you what, then you are like me. We are both idiots with a lot of confidence. The smart ones keep thinking of all the problems and freak out.
Complete idiot, man. I without a doubt, never the smartest guy at the table ever, and tend to just keep my mouth shut and let the smart guys do the talking.
Good.
I'm a good convincer. I'm good at convincing people to like sit at the table, but once they get there, I shut the fuck up. So when did you get to the States? What was that migration like?
Well, it started right after college, 21. I'd done this internship with this crazy dude, entrepreneur named Chris Birch. He's the guy who started, Tory Burch with his wife, and he's a notorious guy, interesting character. And I spent a summer being his bitch, basically, as an intern. And he was the guy who was just literally putting me in all these meetings, looking at all these different startups and companies and getting me excited. I'd stayed in Paris for my college because of a girlfriend, always the same smart decision making here. And then I bounced. For some crazy reason, I went became a banker at Goldman Sachs, thinking that was the most prestigious entry into the work world. I cannot stand finance, didn't really understand Wall Street, but got the gig because I was a good used car salesman and pitching myself. So I sold them, a cheap Hyundai, but told them it was a Ferrari, and they hired me. I left after, I think I left after 90 days, with them screaming that I was burning bridges and I didn't understand the, whatever the opportunity I was missing out on. The reason, because it was .com one, and all these people I was pitching IPOs to were a couple years older than me, and I was like, why am I telling them how to get in public when I could do the same. This doesn't seem like rocket science. So I quit and started my first company, got funded by Chris Birch and a bunch of other dudes. It was called So Funky, and it was a social media company, believe it or not, messaging system. And it failed miserably. I burned through a lot of cash. I printed some really cool t-shirts. We had a ping pong table in our loft. So we made it, you're 20, 21. We'd go to the clubs and, we were just living the life. So
In New York?
In New York, yeah, man. Yeah. And basically realized that I was able to convince a lot of people on a lot of things, but I knew jack about actually producing what I was promising, and I was depending on a bunch of Ukrainian coders that I brought over, and we had good ideas. We just I was way too young, to be honest. So the funny part, talk about failure, is that we went under, and interestingly, most of the founders of the company, my best buddies, all ended up creating these massive businesses. I mean, one of my buddies just closed a $200 million round on his tech company a couple months ago. Another one became this big fashion designer. It's like, it's kind of funny. This was kind of our breeding ground. And more importantly, our investors, like, no one blinked an eye. And I made them whole because one of my investors was Norwegian and was like, hey, I've got this company called Voss that makes water, and it's basically tap water in Norway. And I can get $2 for every dollar I raise in the US. And we want to launch this water business. We think we can do this. And it was one of my investors, a young guy. And I'm like, fuck it, yeah, I'm gonna go see my guys. So I brought all my investors into Voss, and then helped kind of deliver that US launch, and it became a huge hit. I didn't jack, but I made a lot of money for a lot of people that lost money with me before. And that kind of started the whole process. That was like the beginning of this rolling development and understanding that there is no final moment in your career. You're constantly moving with a group, with a pod of people around you, an ecosystem. And that's how my businesses are built. My Harmless investors, stakeholders, and fellow entrepreneurs are in Bravo Sierra, are in Goodfish. This is the same crew, basically. And we're just spawning and kind of leveraging our experience.
I got to hear the story of Harmless and how you came up with that. Because I mean, there's no doubt about it. When coconut water was like first came on the scene, it was like, I don't know, it had to be like the late 90s, right? Something like that, early 2000s. Coconut water came on the scene, and then Harmless came out of nowhere, and for whatever reason was the best tasting coconut water I'd ever had, especially the ones that were pink. I'd always look for the pink ones. The super cold in the back of the refrigerator, pink ones. That was my jam. And it was just a better product. It was just a better product. And so I really want to get the story of how you developed that brand.
It's an interesting one because you could post rationalize all day, but the truth is I worked at L'Oreal for a few years. I quit because I realized I was not going to be able to survive in a corporate environment. Even though they kept promoting me, the more I bitched about my job, the more they gave me a promotion. And I quit. I decided I was living in Delhi with this girlfriend who was a conflict reporter based in India, covering Afghanistan and all these like messed up countries. I was in this like weird space, like learning Sufi poetry, right?
Wait a second. I just want to understand, how did you end up in Delhi? Where did Delhi come from?
I followed my girlfriend, this Colombian girlfriend who was like going into war zones, and she was based in New Delhi. So I was like, I'm going. So it was a pretty raw experience. And my buddy Douglas had quit his job, and he was living in Brazil, kite surfing, basically kite surfing, blowing up his savings on, living in Brazil. And we bumped into each other when we were both back in France. And I went down to his mom's place in the countryside. And we spent a week yapping like Frenchmen do. And at the end, we're like, who are we kidding? Like, we're two privileged, very educated, access to resources, networks, everything. And we're pretending to be these bohemian, in our late 20s, right? Bohemian thinkers that are bitching about the whole system and kind of cruising on it. We're the ultimate phonies. Not only are we the ultimate phonies, but like we're a disgrace to ourselves. And we decided that day, I remember he was driving me back to the train station, and we decided to say, okay, let's do something together. Let's find a project. And from there, that was the start of everything, of Harmless and Good Fish. That started back in 2007. And what we decided to do was say, okay, we have really, 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 really crazy access and understanding of consumer packaged goods, right? Our families, our education, our business experience. So this is going to be our medium. This is going to be our vehicle. What do we think we can do with that?
Wait a second. Can I just ask? Where did the insane like knowledge and access to CPG come from before Harmless?
Well, so Douglas grew up in the shadow of Dannon. His grandfather founded Dannon, and his uncle was running it. So he'd grown in the CPG world. It was part of his life. He was going into, convenience stores, checking out the brands since he was a kid.
What brand?
I grew up. Sorry?
What brand is that?
Dannon. So Dannon, the company. Yeah. So Evian.
Got it.
Hundreds of brands.
Yeah.
And my grandfather had built this company that was a major distributor of Kellogg's, Budweiser, Philip Morris, you name it, in a number of countries, either through military exchanges or civilian distribution. This is a massive business. This is thousands and thousands of employees. And so I grew up, with Mr. Peanut and Heinz being, my presents for Christmas, getting all the swag, because American consumer packaged goods were the vehicle of the American way. And he was a big part of that expansion into global expansion of U.S. brands abroad and in the military as well. I also ended up going to L'Oreal, spending 4 years running marketing for Garnier and for Maybelline makeup for 11 countries. Douglas was a banker at Lazard, focused on consumer goods, so retailers and consumer brands. And everybody we knew around us was from that industry. And my French family, even though my father, grandfather were psychiatrists, the family's been in business for centuries, and they'd been beer brewers, and they'd been making bricks for centuries, and it was part of the kind of foundation of what I was. So the logic for us was to say, well, we know we can burn a lot of bridges now, right? We can use we can burn off the credit card. We can use all the contacts, call up all the Rolodex people and give it a shot if we have a good idea. The idea was super simple. The idea was to say, and now it might seem a bit obvious, but this is 13 years ago or 12 years ago. The idea was to say, we're going to figure out a way to win at the consumer game by making a better product than anything that's promised. So we're going to look at places where people are promising a lot of things. And our example was McDonald's, right? The 30-second ad of that juicy burger, and the fact that I know, guaranteed as the audience, I know it's not going to look or taste like it looks, right? This is not true. So this built-in deception that was basically tacitly agreed upon between the advertiser and the consumer. We all agree it's not going to look that way. We all know this is not true. So the idea we had was to say, we're going to actually deliver the promise. We're going to make the product that other people are spending billions in promoting. And we're going to consider the audience, the consumer, not as dumb. And the tacit agreement is going to be that we're going to actually give you the product, and you're going to be like, oh shit, it actually can happen. And we're going to use that force of actually delivering the product to demonstrate that you do that only if you treat the supply chain, if you have business practices that are focused on the making, not the marketing. So you put the money in making the stuff, not in pushing the stuff. So for every, Rihanna's drinking Zico or whatever it was, Vita Coco for the billboard, and then she's caught by paparazzis drinking Harmless. Why? Because it's just better, and that's the best advertising I get. So why did we do Harmless and a Good Fish at the same time? The promise, the idea was just that. We looked at coconut water from a very cold, I wish I had a foundational legend, right? I wish I could tell you Douglas and I were holding hands on the beach and a coconut fell from a tree and we drank it and we wanted to spread the love of coconut water to the world. But that's really not what happened. What happened is that we saw that Coke and Pepsi, we were looking at food and cosmetics and personal care as industries to kind of really make a difference in sensorial, right? You can really experience it right away. We saw Coke and Pepsi buying up the supply chain of the coconut water industry. So not just the brands, but the actual back end, the industry. So we knew they were in it for a while. And I know their MO, I worked for L'Oreal for years, right? So their goal was to educate the US consumer on the benefits of coconut water as a whole, and then fulfill that with a product. The beauty for them is that coconut water was a perfect new step from Gatorade and Powerade and so on, vitamin water. And it was even cheaper to make because you're using trash, basically. Coconut water from where they stood was a byproduct of the copra, the meat and oil industry of coconut. So they could just take that trash and package it and tell you it was the best thing forever. We also knew the product tasted like shit. And we also, when you try an actual coconut water, it tastes really good. And there's a reason why people across the world, it's one of the #1 consumed products. So we saw all of this arbitrage opportunity to find the right source, and then figure out the technology and then deliver it. And it took that part, I'm simplifying, but that took 3 years. And then we lost our shirt, and then we had no more money, and then we got fucked over by everybody and their mom and all over the world. And then we dealt with the Chinese mob and the Mexican freaking exporters that were screwing us.
You gotta tell me a Chinese mob story. You gotta do it. You gotta do it. There's no way around that.
We were going to Thailand. Thailand was the game. By then we figured out that the source was in Thailand. The coconut we wanted was the specific varietal that has all of those top notes and that you mentioned that are so tasty. It gives that vanilla almond flowery flavor and profile to it. The problem was that a lot of the agriculture in Thailand is overseen by not the government, but the triads, by Chinese mafia. I mean, we call it mafia here. I mean, they're just business people. The thing, though, that was interesting is once we got big in terms of consumption and we needed more and more inventory, we started popping up on the radar in terms of, we're meaningful. Today, I mean, we're very meaningful in Thailand, but this is probably 7 or 8 years ago. And Douglas and I were doing the rounds of some of the farmers that we wanted to work with. More importantly, we were trying to get more inventory, more coconuts, and a lot of those coconuts were being exported to China. We get there to meet a bunch of farmers, and there's nobody. And I'm talking, we get there, we're in the middle of the sticks, right? This is not beaches and music and full moon parties. This is muddy, backwater, not sexy, no tourists, real world Thailand. And we get there and there's just one dude sitting at a picnic table with a gun. And we're like, all right, this is an interesting set of circumstances with no interpreter, speaking Thai and Chinese. We got our guy, and the guy says, well, this gentleman, and there's no farmers, right? No one's around. And he's like, well, this guy's basically telling us that you're not going to get any coconuts unless you deal with him directly now. Now you deal with the big boss. You don't go through farmers. And he tells you the price and the amount, and you say yes. And so it was
that was the guy sitting at the table?
Yep. That's the way it's going to work now. This is the rule now. This is okay. Now you've reached this new level in terms of your magnitude, and if you want to keep doing business and growing, you don't do your own little marginal, hustle with local guys. You deal with the big boss or one of. And for some reason, I think Douglas and I shared the same. This is where TV helps, is you've watched so many movies where it's like the minute you deal with the mob, then you're fucked for life. They're going to keep getting in bigger and bigger, right? Notwithstanding just the ethical part of it. And so we basically told the guy who said, well, first of all, I was scared shitless, as I should have. because they really didn't give a fuck about me. And so we both kind of bluffed our way out and said, well, we really appreciate that, you're giving us the opportunity to deal with you, but we have to work directly with farmers because we have this certification program for fair trade, yada, yada. And unfortunately, it really sucks, but they require us to kind of have that transparency. And I wish it was different, but it's not. So we're going to have to probably close the company. And that was a nice opportunity for us, but, I guess it's not going to happen. So I guess we're going to stop operations altogether. And we left before he got a chance to, really say much.
Was it,
and then the next
like
day,
trying to communicate with him, or like, did he understand English?
No, we had an interpreter, and he spoke perfect English, or at least business English. So he caught up with us and spoke in English to us and said, well, we'll figure out a way. And the next day we came back, and it was the farmers, the families, the villages were packed, and we were back in business. So it was a traumatic experience, but at the same time, one of many, situations where people try to get into your game. Basically, they're trying to get a piece of the action. And don't get me wrong, it's not Thailand only. The U.S. is as bad. If not.
I mean, I'll tell you a funny story. So I opened up a seafood restaurant on the corner of Broome and Mulberry Street.
Okay.
And that restaurant turned into 6 restaurants in the city. And the idea behind Seymour's is I only use local, wild, underutilized species of fish. So I was only using predominantly whitefish, and tuna whenever it's swam locally.
Right.
And so about a year and a half in, I'm on the corner, and remember, I'm on Broome and Mulberry Street, right? Like I was, people thought I was kind of crazy to open up a restaurant like at the mouth of Little Italy, but I was like, they're like, you're going to open up a seafood restaurant in Little Italy? I was like, it's a cool part of New York City. I'm right under the little, welcome to Little Italy sign. It was like, I thought it was a cool thing, especially being a New York City kid. Anyway, one day I'm sitting outside, and this guy walks up to me, very TV-like character, I just knew exactly, what his MO was. And he goes, Mike. And I go, yeah, hey, what's going on, man? Nice to meet you. He goes, where are you getting your fish? And I'm like, oh, I work with local fishermen up and down, from essentially from Portland, Maine, down to Baltimore. And he goes, I'll get you fish. And I was just like, I don't know what to say. I have these long-standing relationships, and it'd be weird for me to just all of a sudden stop getting, getting fish from somewhere else. And he goes, I'm going to drop some fish off. And so I have an old friend who I called up, and I said, hey, John, the guy who approached me is a guy named Baby John. And I said, hey, John, Baby John from Mulberry Street approached me and said he wanted to get me fish. And John said, don't worry about it. I'm going to call up Baby John. And then Baby John came over and said, hey, it's all good. Don't worry about it. But yeah, that stuff totally exists. I mean,
you don't need to buy my fish.
You don't need to buy my fish. Yeah, pretty much. That was pretty much.
I won't stuff it with drugs on its, when it travels down to the city.
Well, one thing he did do, because of the meatball shop, on Mulberry Street, there's a street called the San Gennaro. San Gennaro. So every year there's San Gennaro, and Baby John has 14 stalls on Mulberry Street for San Gennaro. And so he came over to the restaurant one day, and he goes, Mike, you're going to do a meatball shop, double stand with me. I'll pay for the stand. You'll split the profits. And I was like, all right, okay, we'll do that one. We'll do it as long as I don't have to buy my fish from you.
Yeah. So you're in business with the mob, and you personally know Baby John. So I'm halfway made myself now. I think you should, you're made or born should be just literal. Have you been made or are you
Are you
born?
made yet? Are you made yet in business? So, is Harmless like CPG I'm actually myself getting into CPG. My new business is a D2C CPG brand that I'd love to tell you about at some time. But what is it what is it about CPG that you think specifically? I mean, beverage is so tough. What is it? What does it take to win in CPG? Like, is there a magic formula? Is there something that has to work? Is it marketing? Is it distribution? Is it brand? Is it flavor? What is it? Or is it a culmination of all those things?
I mean, everyone's going to say it's a combination, but I'll tell you the story with Harmless. The story with Harmless was that, to get back to the basics, we're selling something that you put in your body, right? So everything else, the branding, the packaging, the label, all that other shit, the story is great and all, but it's what you're putting in your body. There's a reason why people eat foie gras, right? It's literally a fat liver that's been stuffed in a goose or a duck, but it's good, it tastes good. So we're willing to bypass a lot of things for something that tastes good and that we like. So the idea with food is to say, well, we just got to do something that is sensorially, organoleptically, as they say, texture, taste, fragrance, has to be incredibly good. You know why? Because you can call yourself an expert, but everyone who eats is an expert in food, right? So you're dealing with an audience of 400 million experts, and they trust their senses. They don't trust what you're telling them. So that was the premise. I mean, for me, that's the premise for food bev industry, right? You gotta work with that. The rest is gravy. If you got a better tasting product than anyone else, I don't care how many millions of dollars you put, and you can throw every celebrity on every endorsement, I'll beat you. And that's what we did with Harmless. It was about technology. And the idea with our technology was to try to not alter the original flavor, not trying to improve it, but just not change it. And not changing something from the way it started is very, very, very fucking hard. And we went through a lot of pain to create this application of pressure instead of heat. And that was our win, was really tech and industry.
Was that HPP? I mean, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. So HPP didn't exist when we started. I mean, it existed
Can you
for
explain
centuries.
HPP? Can you explain the difference between HPP and temperature?
So thermal pasteurization, basically you got two types. It's either long lower temperature, or, and that's like canning industry, or it's what people like to call flash pasteurization, which is a bullshit word, but basically you're nuking something super hard with temp. And that burns off, it kills everything basically. It also modifies the physicochemical structure of the product, which is why it tastes like shit. In the case of HPP, you're using pressure. So after you filled your product, so post manufacturing, so let's assume this is the bottle. After I've filled my product, I put it in this container that goes into this machine that fills up with water, and I build pressure. It's like a hyperbaric chamber, right? I build pressure. And since it's floating in water, it's isostatic pressure. So it's the same amount of pressure on every part of the bottle, so it doesn't crush. Now, by tweaking the levels of pressure, in our case, I think it was 87,500 pounds of pressure per square inch. And the whole time, you'll destroy the cell walls of the microorganisms you want to get rid of, which are large organisms, pathogens basically. And you'll maintain the integrity of the physicochemical structure. So you're going to extend the shelf life, you're going to get rid of pathogens, and your product's going to taste exactly the same from when it went in and when it went out, which is crazy. Now, that's the theory of it. The practical reality of it is that you have to come up with a lot of complex approaches for how you're bottling your product, the type of plastics you're using for the elasticity of the material, the hold times, the managing of the thawing and thawing, because it's an endless mess. Now it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, which I'm happy I was a pioneer of, but it really shows you that a tech improvement can change a product radically. The reason nobody did it was that it was expensive. Everybody, it could be done. Coke and Pepsi could do it. nothing crazy, but it was just too expensive. And the idea was that if they introduced a product that was HPP, they would beat their own brands, right? Then they'd all have to change to that, and their margin would get screwed, I think. So we killed it. And then a lot of HPP brands came out, and it became kind of a free-for-all. We stuck to our guns, which was low acid, which is a very particular space within the world of beverages, which is the hardest part. Basically like milk and dairy products, which are very difficult to work with, and which includes seafood, actually. And that's where we killed it, because it's very, very challenging to work with that type of product. And then we shifted pretty rapidly to another technology where we borrowed from the drug industry, you know, how vaccines stay active, but are the virus is actually dead. So you're able to denature something and maintain its DNA structure so that the antibodies react to it, right? So we used this concept of microfiltration and membrane filtration that we reapplied to food and beverage about 5 years after, which is how we suddenly boosted our shelf life and expanded the business. So the win on CPG here was purely R&D tech and thinking really hard, and trying to really be aggressive in our approach. It's the same with the salmon, you know. There is no industry for utilizing collagen, fat-rich, you know, seafood skin at scale to turn it into a chip. It's like, it's hell. And nobody wants to touch it, but it's a gold mine for me. And it's got such positive answers. So to make the answer short on the food bev world, CPG in general, when you're talking about fast moving consumer goods, you're talking about personal care and food, I would say generally food bev. You're talking about something that's extremely intimate. It's an intimate relationship. You're putting stuff into you're giving stuff that someone's gonna put in their body or on their face or on their, you know, on their ass. This is about as close as it gets. You're ripping open the packaging. It's what's inside that matters. So it's not apparel. It's not any other soft good. It's really about the actual functional and sensorial experience of the product outside of the packaging, outside of the brand. So that's where I'm focused. Then of course branding. I think branding is over, to put it mildly. If you look at D2C, and I'm, you know, Goodfish is already doing north of $3-4 million run rate in D2C. Bravo Sierra is a fucking hit. I mean, that business has been blowing up. We have 250,000 followers on our brand in a year. It just launched at Target, and it's blowing up because the D2C pickup was huge. The reason for those successes, I think, is the beauty of I'd say social media and direct to consumer is affinity driven development. So we don't really build products and then push them to an audience that we've created. We actually build products with the audience. We identify the audience, and then we work with them and figure out what they want. Like Goodfish, we're launching the new iteration of the product in about a month or so. That's the outcome of 8 months of people telling us what they don't like and what they do like. And then
can I ask you a question about that? So do you have, like, you know how a tech business will have a beta phase, of course, right? Do you do essentially a beta with your D2C where you're you know, you do beta, so you're giving away a ton of product?
The people that think that D2C is the end all in terms of actual mass in business are fools, right? Because to reach scale on D2C, and I mean scale is $100 million in sales, the cost of acquisition of that revenue is too high. You're gonna always lose money. Now, what it offers you though is something much more valuable. It offers you an ongoing R&D engine, product pipeline development, testing, and it offers you a prescriptive audience that's gonna allow you to reach mass through wholesale, brick and mortar, and so forth. So anybody who's in the D2C game today has to understand that they will never have a finished product. They have to go to market with a non-finished product, and they have to build a relationship with their audience, which is, I'm building this with you. I know it's not perfect. Like, I'm not selling you perfection because that was the name of the game 20 years ago. I'm selling you something, an idea. Here's what it looks like now. Buy it, try it, tell me what you think. You could hate it and then help me get it better, and we'll figure it out. Goodfish is a perfect example. Bravo Sierra, the whole model is called Battalion. So we're launching a performance nutrition brand in a couple months. We already did 2 drops of that product. It's an energy drink called Echelon. We built it.
I love
we
that,
developed it with.
by the way. Awesome.
Thanks.
I love the little can too.
Oh, you saw it? All right. Yeah. That thing is crazy, man. So
Cool.
this basically, we borrowed from the culture of rip it in deployment. Service members drink a lot, rip fuel. And we were like, how can we do a better version of that? Yada, yada. So we teamed up with the folks that started Muscle Milk, and we started iterating product with them directly. And then we started doing drops with our Bravo Sierra customers to see what they thought. Well, first of all, it sold out 3 hours the first drop, 27 minutes the second drop. So, it's the beauty of D2C is you've got a built-in audience when you have a pre-existing brand. And we've made so many tweaks. And even the product I'm dropping in June is versionized. It's actually called version 2 point something, whatever the iteration it is. So there is no more finished product is what I mean. You got to take, I was talking to these folks, I think from Chanel, this lady, and I was telling her this story of like, there is no finished product. She's like, it's so funny. Our whole vision of business is we do the perfect final product for that customer. And you're telling me that finished product is finished. It's software. Product CPG is software now. It's versioning, beta test audiences, and you keep improving, and you have a new version of the same thing coming in every 6 months. And as a consumer, you're just updating your software. You're updating your CPG game, and you pick your brands. That's how I see it.
That's very interesting. So like go-to-market strategy, so, I think having someone like you on here, it just makes sense to dig into this industry a bit, right? Because everybody is a consumer. Most people these days are consumers via D2C, and nobody really knows much about it outside of they get an ad on Instagram or Facebook and they like what they see and they have no idea that they've been targeted. No, meaning like the network knows that they're going to like what they see, and then they buy it and then they get it. What is a go-to-market strategy?
First thing is most of the stuff needed to go to market, you can do yourself, or you can do it on the very cheap with a couple of folks around you. There is no advantage to having more resources. Actually, I think it's a disadvantage. If you have raised $500,000 and you're getting an agency to do this and an agency to do that, working, you're going to blow your cash. You're probably going to learn less. I think the go-to-market with D2C is to try to identify your affinity community. And if your affinity community is not you, then you're fucked, because you're trying to preach to an audience that is foreign to you. So whatever product or business you're building, you need to be your number one customer and understand what you're trying to get out of it, because you can speak the language. Identifying that community is actually not that hard, because everybody wants to make a buck on the internet. Everybody wants to live on a social expression of themselves on a digital way. But you can pretty rapidly gather a couple hundred folks to be part of that seed group. And you essentially, if I were to do this now, I would grow that little group and really make them not my partners, but I'd say my brothers in arms in thinking through the brand and getting their feedback. They're happy. People are happy to participate. It doesn't have to cost money. Most of my prescribers are just people that want to be able to say they work with us, right? They're part of it. It's like it resonates well. When you have very few followers, you're in the ask position. Now, Brother Sierra, people are just happy to say that they're working with us because we're becoming pretty respected. So I would go for affinity first, tiny nano little groups, look at what the reactions are from that group. It's the beauty of the live audience, right? It's like at L'Oreal, we never had that. We'd spend millions on testing without even knowing at the end if it's going to work on the shelf. And then from there, I would be very aggressive in launching the most artisanal product. You don't need to wait a year. Just launch whatever you got. Put it out there. Something that you're comfortable with. And yes, you're going to pack the boxes yourself, and you might have to put dry ice that you go buy at whatever. It's going to be grimy and yucky, but that's what makes you valuable, is that you are the asymmetric David versus Goliath thing, is that you're nimble and quick and you're authentic and credible, where the other big brand is, obviously a very different thing. Also, the beauty of D2C is that it's person to person, it's peer to peer. leverage that. You don't want to pretend to be a big thing when you're not. You're not big, you're small. Be small and enjoy. Email the freaking guy, DM the guy that said he hates your product, and like, wait, you're the founder and owner? You're like, yeah, I am. I'm a real person. There is no corporate entity. There is no system. When you're calling customer service, you're texting my cell phone, bro. So that is something that you got to leverage when you can, while you can. It's your biggest asset. It's the guerrilla value of what you have. Only before, guerrilla marketing was pretty rough to do. But with D2C, the value of your Instagram ad versus Coke's are the same. It's the same amount of real estate at the same time in front of the same person. So once you get that traction, I think that the trick is to get your business to that $2 to $3 million run rate with that core group. And then the real problem comes, because everybody in D2C, from my perspective, think very short term. Preaching to the choir, catering to your community takes about a year or 2 years, and then you get those numbers and you're like, yeah, I'm grooving. I was able to go from 0 to 1 million or 0 to 5 million. Sky's the limit. The big problem is, and this is the one I keep telling all these entrepreneurs that I've invested in or whatever, is once you've reached that first glass ceiling in your audience, now you got to start selling your product to people that don't care about you, don't like you, don't want to know you. And that's a whole different ballgame. And that's where your product needs to speak for itself. So that first window of time is for you to refine and create that product for that second group, which is the mass. And then you have a story, then you have a narrative. So that would be my strategy. I think today you can build a good D2C brand for about $100,000 and be able to, notwithstanding, living expenses of the founders, but for 100 grand, you can go to market with something, even if it means going to the farmer's market and picking up tomatoes and making tomato sauce, or hopefully buying shit tomatoes from the back of the truck of the tomato guy, and throwing your thing on online with very little money and get enough of a learning to see if it's worth pursuing. And for that, you got to assume that everything you're going to do for that year is not going to be the final product, final brand, final story. It's okay. You got to accept that volatility and variation. That would be my goal for the guys like you and I. They're like, let's just fucking do it. D2C is the dream. Now, the problem with D2C is that it is not the end. You can, like, Glossier's done super well. Emily's done super well staying D2C only. To a certain level, and that's really a community-driven business. But you also have to figure out how you're going to generate mass, how you're going to generate scale, mostly if you've got a high volume, low price product.
Wow, I love that. Thank you very much for that breakdown. Happiness. I know we have a few minutes left, and I just wanted to talk to you quickly about happiness.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, it's changed a little bit since I've had kids. Interestingly, it's simplified the whole thing. From my perspective, ever since I became a dad, I just became a best supporting actor, more than the main guy in my movie. So happiness now is to figure out how to make this family thrive. And I think the trick for me was to feel like there's a sense of accomplishment in what I do professionally that is seamless with how my family lives and how my children see me and what their experience of life. So everything that I do business-wise, I need to be able to explain it to my 5-year-old in a way that she looks at me and understands, first of all, what the fuck I'm doing, and B, thinks it's awesome and inspiring and a good thing, right? So happiness is making my children happy and my wife, and that requires me to have a very limited, scope in terms of what I do with my time. So happiness is exactly that. It's this continuous process of flurry of activity, personal and professional, which is completely blended. My best friends are my founders, right? Douglas is one of my best buddies. I've done Good Fish and Harmless with him. Benjamin's one of my best friends. I've done Bravo Sierra, now Echelon with him. A lot of my buddies are investors, stakeholders. We're all So having that very rare ecosystem of friendship, family, and even my family's involved in my businesses, and business is pretty rare, and that's happiness for me. It's this ability, I would say, to not think of the life as a 5-day week and a weekend, not think of it as a 9 to 5. And sure, it's exhausting and I'm working all the time and everybody's like, we've never taken a vacation in 12 years. But to be honest, like I don't care really about vacation stuff. It's always seamless. Like, you know, I don't know, you're making me emotional here, but happiness is building the life you want for yourself, you know, however it works. And I'm there. I'm actually, you're talking to me at a point in my life where I've rarely been more happy. And it's funny that it's kind of like my idea of love. My idea of happiness and love when I was younger was this high octane, high intensity, high, you know, sensoriality experience. And really happiness and love are these slow burn, very, very comforting, very strong feelings that endure. And that's where I'm at now.
Do you think COVID has had something to do with your level of happiness?
Yeah, I'm going to sound like an asshole, but it's turned me inwards, and inwards, my life is good. I have wife and kids, and obviously business wise, there was a lot of opportunity for us to kind of grow in that time. Yeah, I think just spending the last 16 months at home, and of course I have a crazy setup, and I'm definitely not a good comp, but yeah, it's made me, I'm super happy. I'm not looking forward to traveling as much as I used to. I am super happy that the new office culture is, there is no office, because I haven't really had an office for 10 years, even though there's offices for the companies I run. They've always been kind of these empty desks that I show up to from time to time since the beginning. So this is fortunate for me that it's changing the way we work. You know, it's not possible for everyone, but for those who are going to offices, this is a blessing if that's going to be a structural change. At least, you know, part-time office, part-time home, getting more time at home with your kids, the dream.
Amazing. For me, it's incredible. Having dinner with my kids every night is like, it wasn't part of the story, you know, and now it is.
And as a guy who was in hospitality restaurant, I mean, talk about the most fucked up hours in the world.
Fucked up hours in the world, yeah.
Now, good for you. And I think a lot of people are seeing it that way. And all the wish-wash about self-care and yada, yada, you know, and people are like, well, no, you got to be in pain to succeed for some reason. Like, not really, actually. You can actually have a pretty nice life and work really, really hard, and it doesn't need to be painful. My mom got me this Tiffany keychain when I was 16 for my birthday, silver keychain with this engraved "no pain, no gain," which is obviously, you know, one of America's favorite mantras. And I have it now, and I'm like, nah, you got it wrong, man. That's not true. No, you don't have to be in pain. You got to suffer from you and learn how to acknowledge the experience of life and grow from it. But you don't need to suffer to succeed. It's not true.
You know, I think something that I've learned over the years is the ego tends to be the biggest hurdle, right? As we grow and learn and navigate through this journey, you know, I've been confronted by ego more times than not. That's my arch nemesis. You know, it's not the hours, it's not the amount of, you know, the amount of time you spend. It's the self-awareness and the humility to be like, whatever this is that's happening, this fucking confrontation I'm dealing with this thing that's self-made is like, that's the bump in my road. And that voice has gotten so much quieter over the last few years. You know, and that's funny how we started the conversation, right? Like, we're both fucking idiots that just jump off the cliff into the patch of jellyfish. So I guess the only other question that I wanted to ask you was this idea of habits. I believe habits are everything. I really do. I believe habits make us or break us, or both. Do you have any routines or any habits that you've stuck to consistently over time that you can draw back to some success in your life, or something that potentially makes you who you are today?
Yeah, you can call it intellectual exercise, right? Intellectual workouts, which is, I think, critical for anyone, but basically learning about stuff that has absolutely no purpose. That's something that's always been common thread over the years. Reading or whatever it may be, but it has no practical application to my life. Reading medieval poetry for 6 months, every day. Reading old Greek texts that have no real value for whatever I'm practically doing. Nothing useful, and not even that entertaining, to be honest. Like, I'd rather watch some bullshit show on Netflix. But just getting into stuff that's very foreign to me, not out of necessarily curiosity, even though that probably drives it, but it's a mental vacation. It's not family, it's not my culture, it's not what's happening now, it's not feeding my thoughts about what I want to do or what I should be doing. It's got no real application in my life, and incredibly fertile, because it's going to drive thinking in a very different way, and that's my habit. That's my number one habit. Last night I started a book. It's just the collected writings of Matisse throughout his life. So some dude, some university press found and put together all the letters and shit he wrote for 80 years. And I'm reading the letters that Matisse wrote to other people. As a major artist throughout his life, he's talking about fucking cutting out paper and talking to his ex-girlfriends, in the 1800s. Is it fascinating? Not really. It's pretty basic stuff. He's a pretty regular guy, but it serves a purpose. I know it does. So yeah, I think that the habit I have is definitely that. The other habit I have, which has started a few years ago, is I like cars, so I have a couple of convertibles, but I drive my convertible, rain or shine, cold, wherever I was. I was in Long Island before, it didn't change my MO, but I try to take a drive every day alone for about 15, 20 minutes. Here, I'm very lucky. I'm on near PCH, so I just go Pacific Coast Highway up and down the coast. I just do that, even if it's to go pick up a burritos for the family. But it's my top down, blast the wind, no music, no thinking, no phone, no online, nothing. I can't connect. I got to look at the road. I can't talk because the top is down, and I'm suddenly getting a blast of the universe in my face. And it seems like a really silly thing and it's basic, but it does. It's a habit that really works well. I wish I could tell you I'm on a Peloton every day and I'm working out, or I'm really good at boulder climbing. I try all that stuff, right? I pretend to do all that stuff. I'm a lazy piece of shit, and so I need to get kicked in the ass and try, but I don't have that habit yet. I never will by now, I think. And a date with my wife, one-on-one, with a babysitter once a week. That's a habit.
So you get a babysitter and you guys have a date night?
Yes, we have one babysitter who comes every week. It's obligatory, and whether we feel like we need it or not, and she comes every Friday or Saturday, and we are without kids for a few hours every week. And I think it's the best decisions we ever made to do that. I started a couple years ago.
We do the same.
I will
say, yeah, we do, but we unfortunately have had stretches through the pandemic where
Sure.
what's happening in, before pandemic, it was religious Thursday nights, like clockwork. It's a great habit. I also really love the driving in your drop top for 15, 20 minutes and really getting blasted by the universe. Like I could, that just feels so invigorating and so like freedom provoking. I do a walk every day at 4:30, where I try my best not to schedule calls or anything. But if I have to do a call, I'll take a call on my walk. But I do this 4-mile loop up here. And it's just like, I never knew the impact of, like, not that I didn't know the impact of nature, but like I never exposed myself in a real way on a consistent basis to nature. So when I first started doing this walk, like a year ago, when we first came up here, I didn't even look up. Like I was just like, I'm like a city guy. I'm like walking. You know what I'm saying?
20 more blocks to do. And then
like I'm just walking. And then one day, it was starting to snow, and I looked up and I was like, holy shit, I've been fucking looking, like I have not, like I'm out here taking a walk, like I'm surrounded by this unbelievable bounty. Like what am I, like how, and then it changed, and that universal sort of like I genuinely feel when I'm out there walking every day now, that is my conscious contact with the universe, man. It's like this, like I do it no matter what. It could be pouring rain, sleet. Fucking, this is the worst winter ever. Like 40 below zero. I'm out there in my, onesie snowsuit getting after it.
Getting that habit, probably now getting out of the habit would be misery.
Yeah.
You can't move back to the city, man. You're screwed.
Well, no, I was out in the city. I was out in the city the last few days, and I've like walked 25,000 steps. I normally get around the city on a motorcycle. I'm like a motorcycle guy, and I was like, yeah, I'm not taking the bike out. I'm gonna walk everywhere. My motorcycle days are numbered. This was so much fun, man. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you hopping in. And I always finish with the question of whether you think you were born or made. What do you think?
I think I was born. I'll tell you why. I got 2 daughters. So distinctly different in terms of personality, it freaks me out. I've got one sister who's a painter. She's an artist. She has the same background as me. There's no reason why she'd be different from the nurture side. I think I was born that way. And I think the big process is, for those of us who have that mix of things, we're going to be unhappy and frustrated in everything we do until we find that outlet. So, if there's a message to give to entrepreneurs, 90% of the ones who think they are probably not, but they have to maybe try to realize that. The ones that are most of them don't realize that that's their outlet. They're in the wrong spot. They might be unhappy and frustrated with their lives, but maybe that's because they haven't found that the outlet for them is to build their own things and grow their own things, and that's their DNA.
Dude, much appreciation. Keep inspiring us. Where can we stay in like follow along? Are you on social media?
I'm not personally, but the companies are, and I watched them like a hawk. I want to be in touch with you because I want to hear about your D2C plan. That's my game.
Oh yeah, I'm going to tell you all about it. It's a good one. It's all about, it's actually called Creatures of Habit. It's all about habits. I think habits, I love your habits, man. I'm about to hop on eBay and go buy myself a goddamn convertible. It sounds like such a great daily thing. Anyway,
I got a 90 BMW E30 3 Series, the one that looks like a little block of soap or a little brick, white on white on white, white rims, white leather, white, perfect Malibu car. The shit has 160,000 miles on it. I don't think I've ever put the top up. And the convertibles where you can still put your arm over the door and just let your arm like drop down, pre whatever regulations. And that's my gig, man. I'm just cruising. I'm going 35. I feel like I'm going 100. And I'm getting my feet blasted with the wind. It's the dream.
Yeah. I get that on my motorcycle, but you're just.
Yeah, I know. When you said that, I was like,
you're
you're probably
hyper aware though, you know, like you the focus on a motorcycle is just, you're not able to do the lean, you know, unless you're one of those crazy son of a bitches that ride, you know, with one hand.
There's a couple in Malibu. There's a couple that cruise up and down the coast on weekends. You know, I can't ride a bike. I'd kill myself. I'm too out of it, and I get too excited. I used to ride bikes when I was in France, and I like dirt bikes and all that fun stuff. But yeah, come out and see me. Come out and visit. Come and hang out.
Well, dude, you bet. I was just out there for 2 weeks. I love it out there. We had 2 brutal battles, my wife and I, while I was out there, because I was like, it's 75 and sunny every day, 55 at night. I could put on my beanie and a sweatshirt and a t-shirt during the day. Like, what are we doing in New York? This is ridiculous. All my friends live in California on the beach. Like, let's go fight. Not having it. So,
well, I'll introduce you to my wife. She was a hardcore New Yorker. She used to work at Beth Israel, you know, doing emergency detox. She was like hardcore downtown New Yorker. She's in Malibu now and she's thriving. She's like, what? New York? Never. I would never go there.
Well, she's there. She's actually going out to LA. I've got to be quiet because she's still super burnt about me wanting to go there so bad. But she's going to LA in a few days to surprise a friend. I'm hoping that her friend deeply impacts her decision-making process.
Well, I'll join the team to convince her if you want, whenever you want. Come and hang out, the 2 of you. Come for, you know, I'll make it super, super nice. I'll make sure the kids are beautiful and don't cry.
It's just crazy that we don't live there. I mean, it's just too good. All right, man, I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much. You're the best. Much appreciation, and keep crushing it, brother.
Same for you. Take care, man. Thank you.